Beneath the grey stone walls of the Tower of London lies a silence that once broke beneath, the echo of final footsteps. Here, where the crown gleamed brightest, shadows grew deepest, a royal fortress built by William the Conqueror to command and to terrify. It would, in time, become something darker, a place where history itself learned to whisper in fear. When William the Conqueror ordered the tower's construction, it was meant to be a monument of conquest, a symbol that England's crown would never again tremble. It served as palace, treasury, armory, and prison, and yet within its stones grew a quiet promise that those who defied the crown would one day pay their debt here in blood. By the late medieval age, the tower had changed, no longer a home of kings, but a stage for their vengeance. Executions within these walls were rare, reserved for those whose blood was too royal, whose death too dangerous for public spectacle. On Tower Green, the monarchy could control both the blade and the message it carried. She never sought the crown that condemned her. Lady Jane Grey, 16 years old, brilliant, devout, and doomed. They called her the 9 Days Queen, but her brief reign was not ambition. It was coercion born of the hands that shaped her fate. In 1553, King Edward VI lay dying. To keep the Catholic Mary Tudor from the throne, Protestant nobles sought a new figurehead. Jane, young, educated, and faithful to the new church, became their instrument. She accepted the crown in tears, her voice trembling beneath the weight of a nation's ambition. 9 days later, the game ended. Mary Tudor claimed her birthright with iron resolve. Jane was taken to the Tower, not as monarch but as prisoner. For a time, she was spared. Yet fate is cruel to those who symbolize rebellion, even in innocence. On the 12th of February, 1554, she was led to Tower Green. The sky hung low, heavy with grief. "I am come hither to die," she said, "and by the law I am condemned." Blindfolded, trembling, she searched for the block. "What shall I do?" "Where is it?" she whispered, and the answer came in silence. The axe fell. England's youngest queen was gone. If Jane's death was tragedy, Margaret Pole's was horror. A woman born into royalty, survivor of dynasties, and last of the Plantagenets, yet her bloodline alone sealed her doom. Her son Reginald dared call Henry a tyrant, questioning his break from Rome. Though she had no hand in his words, Henry's paranoia knew no innocence. He struck at blood, not guilt. And so, the Countess of Salisbury was dragged to the Tower. On May 27, 1541, the executioner's blade turned the Tower into a scene of chaos. She refused to bow her head, proclaiming innocence until the end. The axe fell again and again, a death not of law but of fear. Even her enemies turned away. Anne Askew, scholar, gentlewoman, believer. She died not for treason or lust, but for faith. Her voice, pure and unyielding, echoed through the Tower when all others fell silent. Dragged to the Tower under the command of Sir Richard Rich, Anne endured torment no noblewoman had before. Torn upon the rack until she could no longer stand, she was carried to the stake. For her, death would come not by axe, but by fire. On July 16, 1546, she faced the flames. "I would rather read 5 lines of the Bible," she had written, "than hear 5 masses in church." The powder ignited, the fire roared, and England gained its first female martyr of the Reformation. Catherine Howard, the rose without a thorn, barely 17 when she became queen, radiant and reckless. But in the court of Henry VIII, beauty was no shield against betrayal. When whispers reached the king of lovers past, of stolen nights, affection turned to wrath. Catherine was seized, accused of adultery, condemned without trial. Her youth could not save her. Her tears could not melt iron. On the eve of her death, she rehearsed her final act, lowering her neck to the block again and again, whispering prayers into the darkness. The girl who danced in royal halls, now prepared to die before dawn. February 13th, 1542, Catherine. Howard ascended the scaffold where so many noble women had fallen. She spoke softly with sorrow and grace. Then in one swift motion, the blade silenced her forever. Her body was laid beside her cousin Anne Boleyn. Queens both, victims both. Justice in the Tower was never about guilt. It was about control, the power's illusion of order. Jane Grey, Margaret Pole, and Askew, Catherine Howard, their names echo still through the tower's cold corridors, not as traitors, but as warnings. For in the end, the Tower of London did not guard kings. It remembered their sins. Each woman died beneath a different pretext: treason, faith, passion, yet all were executed by the same hand: power, unbound and absolute. Their stories are not merely history, but mirrors reflecting how crowns rise and consciences fall. Before the fire took her, Anne Askew wrote, "I would rather read 5 lines of the Bible than hear 5 masses in church." And in those lines, across centuries of silence, she speaks still for truth, for courage, for the powerless who stand before the crown. Now the tower sleeps, its stones heavy with memory, its air thick with centuries of secrets. Beneath the earth, the bones of queens and martyrs lie side by side, their stories carved not in monuments, but in silence. And as the wind sighs through the ramparts, one truth endures, that power without mercy builds its own prison, and history never forgets those who bled to remind it.